Hey everybody, welcome back to another scintillating installment of Brand Federation's Beer and Brands. I'm Matt Williams, managing partner at Brand Federation, along with our founding partner, Kelly O'Keefe.
Hi everyone.
And we are coming to you today from Final Gravity Brewing Company here in the lovely city of Richmond, Virginia. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about marketing in a recession. We're going to talk about a new relationship and a new way for employees and employers to manage their relationship and build their culture. But before we do that, we're going to bring in Tony Amendolia, the owner of Final Gravity, so he can tell us what we're drinking today. Tony, what do we got?
Tony.
Hey, how's it going?
All right.
I got the Doppler Effect IPA that's made with all mosaic hops and a Stepping Stone Blonde Ale.
Excellent.
Fantastic. Thank you for having us here. The place is awesome.
Pleasure to have you.
Cheers.
And we will talk about Final Gravity in just a couple minutes. All right, Kelly, let's dive in. You may notice we have a special guest here.
I did notice that.
Please welcome Ryan Chandler-Dovis, a partner of ours at Brand Federation, who's with us all the way from her home in Mexico, of which we are very, very jealous.
It's ridiculous, really.
Yeah, so the three of us are going to have a conversation about two topics today. The first is, believe it or not, it looks like we might be heading into a recession. I think there are a lot of people, maybe myself included, who think we're probably already in this recession.
Sort of appropriate. We're doing this on a stormy day here in Richmond because it feels like the clouds are coming.
That's right, very cloudy. So we want to talk about how marketers should think about approaching marketing strategy in a recession. And then we want to talk about, especially with you here, Ryan, how should marketers and leaders of any organization think about managing their culture in a virtual world, in a world where employees are more often remote, just like you are, right, in Mexico. So we want to have a conversation about that. But let's start with marketing in a recession. How should I, as a marketing director or a CEO of a company, think about allocating my marketing dollars in a recessionary environment? And I want to start this conversation with something we know, right? There's lots of opinions about marketing in a recession, but there's also data out there. So let me cite a couple of studies to get us started. There's an old study from McGraw-Hill that came out relative to the 1980s recessions, but the findings are really interesting. So they followed 600 companies in 16 industries through the recessionary period of the 80s. And what they found is that those companies who kept up their level of advertising and marketing spend had 256% higher sales post-recession than those companies who cut back or stopped marketing spend. 256%, that's pretty amazing. Those that cut their advertising spend had 0% share growth in the period immediately following the recession. Now that's dated data,
right?
If I can say that, dated data. It's the 80s, but it's an interesting data point. In a more recent study, Bain Consulting in 2019 did a study that looked at winners and losers in the recession immediately prior to that, in 2018. They found that the winners in that recessionary environment, the companies who won, grew 17% in the time immediately following the recession.
That's huge.
Right? And that the losers were flat. And the thing that distinguished those two categories were that the winners viewed their marketing spend as an investment and kept it up, and the losers cut it. So we can learn some things from some of that data, and some of the things we learn have some strategic implications for how we talk about managing our marketing spend in a recessionary environment. So how do we, as strategists who counsel senior level people about spending their marketing dollars, what do we tell them? What do we think that data means?
Well, I think one of the things it means is that if you are looking at strategy and you're looking at marketing for your business, then what you're always trying to identify is where is there a competitive advantage in the circumstances that have been presented to me. A recession has the same kinds of competitive advantages available to you. So what it often means is that your competitors are all dialing back their investment. They're dialing back investment in R&D, they're dialing back investment in marketing. They're playing cautious mode. And when that happens, it's sort of like being a runner at the track. The other runners who have been in line with you all of a sudden have slowed down. Do you want to slow down like them? Or do you want to keep the pace? And if you keep the pace in a recession, you're likely to benefit from that. You will have an opportunity, because your competitors have slowed their activity down, to stay one or two steps ahead. And that's going to benefit you not only when it comes back, but even in the meantime.
That's really interesting. So, there's some really simple math at play here, right? So in advertising, we always talk about share of voice. So what's your share of spend versus your competitors, or as a share of total spend in your category. If your other competitors are cutting back, the denominator in that equation is going down. And if you keep your numerator the same, the math is your share goes up. Super simple. So it doesn't mean spend like a crazy person going into a recession, but it does mean that if you maintain your spend, you have an opportunity, if you're smart about it, to grow your share of voice, because chances are your competitors are going to pull back.
I think there's a related implication too, which is that the likelihood that your competitors will start to lose touch with their customers goes up, because they're probably not going to be investing in the research. And as we know, the change really accelerates during these recessions. So the importance that we put on research and investing in understanding that change and new needs from our customers or your clients or your donors, whoever they are, becomes increasingly important.
That's interesting. So what I'm hearing is that the listening to customer part of your business sometimes falls away in a recession, but actually it should do the opposite. You should be really on top of how they're feeling these changes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we just saw this as we went through COVID. Things changed so rapidly, and so many of the giants before COVID lost touch with those consumers and therefore fell away. They lost relevance.
Yeah, it's a shock. It's going to disrupt the way your customers think. And if you're not in touch with that, you're going to miss some opportunities. It's a really interesting point. I think another way to think about this is that there's a tendency to do a knee-jerk reaction in a situation like this. Oh my God, I have to cut my prices. Oh my God, I have to raise prices to replace a drop in revenue, right? There's another piece of interesting research that Harvard Business Review did that said there are people who seesaw relative to price during a recession, and there are people who hold the line on price. And the people who hold the line on price, the companies who hold the line on price, consistently do better coming out of the recession than the ones who seesaw back and forth. Because they lose, when you switch prices so much, you tend to lose consumer trust, and consumers tend to find a more stable alternative, especially in an environment like a recession where everything feels so unstable.
So it's almost counterintuitive. Your instinct might be, we better cut our prices because things are softening out there. It's absolutely the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, you have to hold steady. I think a lot of the themes, the strategic themes that come back to managing marketing in a recession will come back to take a deep breath and think strategically, and try to avoid the knee-jerk reactions that are so easy to take in an environment like this.
How does that impact things like R&D? We tend to think in the good times we can invest in innovation.
Yeah.
Should they be cutting that off?
Well, of course, this goes back to research as well. New needs will arise, new desires will arise, and if you are investing in that research and you're knowing your customers, you have the opportunity to create new products at a time where they will be most needed and be ahead of the edge when it comes to releasing those products to the marketplace.
Yeah, so let's think broadly about marketing strategy. It's not just advertising, communications, or brand support. It's product development, R&D. There's an interesting piece of research also from Harvard that talks about how the best time to introduce a new product in recessionary times is right after the middle of the recession. Well, it's hard to know when that hits if you're in the middle of the recession, but it does say if your knee-jerk reaction is to cut marketing spend and have that include R&D, don't. Because if you miss that window to introduce a new product on the immediate, kind of past the immediate midpoint of the recession, you're missing the best time to do it. So
that's interesting.
Back to the knee-jerk, right?
Yeah.
Don't knee-jerk cut spend, but don't knee-jerk cut product development or R&D either.
And aren't recessions generally shorter than we tend to think they're going to be?
Yeah, 10 to 11 months tends to be the average.
So if you're going to introduce new product midway in 10 to 11 months, you want to be doing the research so you can have empathy for that customer situation and be doing the R&D well in advance of that.
Yeah, you don't want to be in a position where when the recovery hits, you're in rebuilding mode. You want to be able to lean into that recovery. You don't want to be trying to catch up when the recovery hits.
Such a good point.
That brings me to one thing that I think is always important to do, recession or not, but especially in a recession, which is that a lot of companies have a given attrition on a year-to-year basis. They bring in new customers, they lose old customers, and let's say that attrition is 10%. In a recession, it gets harder to bring new customers in sometimes. And so what we're usually used to is being able to outsell our attrition.
Yeah, right.
It's okay if we lose 10% of old business because we get in 20% of new business, we still have growth. But if there isn't a lot of new business, then what you want to do is cut those attrition rates. And the best way to do that is to focus on retention of the existing customer base.
Yeah.
And that's something you can also use research to do, to find out what their wants and needs are, to have empathy to how they're responding to tighter times. But it's also just good basics, making sure you're in contact as much as possible.
Yep.
Making sure that you are helping to provide them the services that they need at a time when they're also under some stress.
Yep.
And showing your gratitude for having that relationship.
Yeah, help them out.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. One of the side effects of research people often don't consider is that it makes people more invested in your company and its success. You've listened to them and they've helped form the changes to come. It's especially relevant in a B2B environment during a recession, where you're reaching out to those clients and you're making them feel like they're part of the solutions to come. It's something that we hear a lot about as an after effect that people didn't come to expect from the research, but we know it in the donor space. We know that donors that volunteer or are more invested to give in those organizations. The same is true when it comes to asking your customers of their opinion and getting them involved in the solutions of the future of your company.
That's awesome. All right, so let's boil this thing down to some implications. If you're a marketing director or a CEO of a company or CMO of a company who's thinking, how do I manage my marketing spend in a recession? A couple of lessons we've talked about, right? One is stay close, really close to your customers, right? There are multiple benefits to that.
Yep.
Avoid knee-jerk reactions. Step back, think strategically. This is not a time to take drastic knee-jerk action, right? Reinforce an investment mindset. Think of your marketing spend as an investment. It's not a cost. Those companies who approach this as an investment that they need to think strategically about in a recession do better uniformly based on the research than companies who don't. Think retention first, right? How do I serve these customers I've got, and how do I keep them and help them during this time?
That's great.
And then the last one is keep your perspective. Where do you want to be at the end of this recession? It's 10 to 11 months away. Yes, manage carefully during it. But where do you want to be when you come out of it? Don't be in recovery. Don't be in rebuilding mode when the economy's in recovery.
I love that. I think you could almost add one more, which is there is an advantage any time of crisis to asking yourself, where's the waste in my spending?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I don't want to sound like, hey, just keep spending, guys, it's all going to be good. Although for the most part, that's true of the data. But almost every organization has some waste in their marketing spend. That might be a sponsorship of a tournament that we like to go to, but isn't really impacting the bottom line. It could be a wide variety of things. And this is not an opportunity to be waste, to look and say, where do I have fat in my budget? Where do I have waste? Where do I have unproven techniques that aren't informed by research? And those are things that you can cut back on if you need to tighten your belt a little bit.
Yep.
Don't cut back on those things we just mentioned.
Yeah. And that's part of the investment perspective.
Right.
Let's be really careful about how we manage our investments, and marketing's an investment. All right, you can't have a conversation with a senior manager in any capacity in any company, no matter how big they are, what business they're in, without having a conversation about the changing nature of the relationship between companies and their employees, and how do I manage in a virtual world, and how do I think about that? How do I bring people back to the office if that's what I want to do? How do I manage people some of whom are remote, some of whom are in the office? It's a whole new wrinkle in the management world. And we have a great opportunity here, since Ryan is here, to talk about at least how we think about it.
Absolutely.
As Partners in Brand Federation, how do we manage that kind of situation? And maybe we start, Ryan, by telling us your story a little bit. Tell the folks, like, how do you think about remote work life?
Yeah, well, it's been an evolving perspective. And I think it really started with our family had dreamed of living abroad and living somewhere Spanish speaking. My husband's family's Argentine for as long as we've been married. We've been married 17 years. Our kids were kind of getting at that crux point. COVID happened. We'd been at home and we had the thought, like, I think we can do this. I think we can go somewhere else and really make it happen. But I, as you all know, very invested in Brand Federation and its future and this company. And so I talked to you all and I said, what do you think? Do you think I can do this? Do you think? And you both said, I think you should. Which was amazing. It was an amazing, empowering discussion. So we sold our house right here in Lakeside, moved to the west coast of Mexico, and the joy that came from that experience really changed my perspective and the kind of company that we wanted to keep forming. You know, we had this idea that when people are living great lives, they do great work, and we'd kind of, it was already in our model, it was already in our DNA, but I think it was the point that I realized we have to lean in. Like, this is so magical, because people have dreams their whole life that they put off because it can't happen, and their work has to be the foundation for where they live and how they build those lives. And work actually has disrupted people's love, people's dreams, people's futures so many times, and we're moving into a space where that's not necessary. And when you're free from it, that space of, you know, I put this off, you get angry then, and anger disrupts your ability to be kind, collaborative. It makes work the center of your universe, and sometimes it can make you very self-aggrandizing. When you take that away, you're a better person, you're better at work, you're a better collaborator, you have more loyalty to the company. And so I think my experience is one of now many in our company of people being able to lean into their lives. And the effect of that is just magical.
I love it. And I love when we get onto a meeting in our business and we're talking about a client, and I'm looking and seeing a colleague in San Francisco, a colleague in Amsterdam, a colleague in Mexico. It just creates a really interesting energy, because it's as though we're together. We're still working efficiently. We're still working collaboratively. And I think one of the challenges out there is a lot of businesses are fearful of this shift. We've leaned into it. It's part of our business model, but they're fearful of it. And they're waiting for normal to return. And it isn't going to return, right? It's not happening. I mean, there may be some kind of a hybrid for different companies, and we want to show respect for those people in areas like food service, where being remote is not an option.
Right.
But for a lot of business, it is an option, and it's a very good option.
Yeah. On a practical level, what's been hard about it? What have you had to adjust to?
You know, I think you have to change the way you think about digital meetings. So, you know, we have in a physical workspace, we have water coolers, we have the walk to the coffee machine, we stop by each other's offices. If you let, you know, your Zoom or Teams or whatever meetings be, let's get down to business and that's it, you don't have relationship building. So you have to start just being really, really thoughtful. Like, each meeting starts with, you know, just
talking.
Yeah. What happened
Talking.
this weekend?
Right.
Yeah.
Tell me about your cat I just saw, or your kid, or whatever that is. You have to really invest in these spaces in between. You have to be willing to say, hey, Matt, can we do virtual coffee? Let's chat it out about this thing, or just talk about our lives. You know, we have a colleague who has chickens on the farm and got little peeps, and we all wanted to get on a Zoom and see the little chickens. You know, you have to create those spaces of comfort in order to do it. So it's a challenge. It's not a challenge that you have to overcome in the traditional sense, but it's a challenge to be aware of.
You have to be mindful. You have to build around it.
Yeah. I think that another thing, you know, just to take into account is we know the value of diversity. Everybody talks about the value of diversity, and we're very aware that having people with different perspectives, different backgrounds, different lived experiences together in a room makes stronger work. That same benefit exists with location diversity, having people in different areas exposed to different subcultures coming together and sharing those spaces. There are challenges also with diversity. People are going to have a really different lived experience, and sometimes you have to say, I don't understand that point of view. So you have to take the time. You always have to take the time to open these things up, to open these conversations up, to want to learn from each other. And so, you know, to the extent that we want meetings to be very efficient, they might ultimately get less efficient. We're taking the time to understand each other. We're taking the time to socialize. And you have to build that in, but you don't have travel time. You don't have all these other things that we're drawing away from your time in a physical work environment. And so from that point of view, you have the time to make the time for these other culture building experiences.
Yeah. One of the things that gets talked about a lot, which we've found to be completely true, is that when you take away the geographic constraints on recruiting and talent, it's so interesting and so much easier to find the very best people, no matter where they are, Because
Yes.
you don't have this thing that I remember having in my last job, which was the first question you ask is, wow, we have a really talented person. How do I get her to move to Richmond? Well, now I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
If I have the systems in place to work with her the way you're talking about, she's going to be happy as hell working no matter where she is. And she'll love working for us, and we'll get her talent. She won't have to move. It's perfect. And we don't have that geographically limiting factor that says, wow, she's great, but we can't hire her because she won't move.
I think that's so true, and I think it's also such a family-friendly approach to the world. We came out of a world where it could be really challenging. You know, I'm a dad of 4. I had to get on the plane all the time to go to meetings. You're away from your family. You're not there at dinner time. You're not there to tell that story at the end of the day. Perhaps your partner is feeling that they're not adequately supported. And we all, everybody knows that story. We've all been there.
Yeah.
With a more virtual world, our people can stay closer to home. They can stay closer to family. And they still get just as much work done, but they feel great about their life. That balance that we all used to find so elusive, I think people are starting to find it, and they're starting to see that it empowers not only a better family life, but a better work life.
Yeah, that's great. So I'll plug this because I know you're too modest to. You should go to brandfederation.com and check out the blog that Ryan wrote on this topic. It's got some really good information from her firsthand experience about what it's like to work from thousands of miles away from your colleagues and how it can actually be an amazing positive effect on your life and on your work. But we're really happy you're here.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
really happy to be here with you all.
And if you're out there and you're worried about how do I get my people back to the office, will that ever happen? I don't know how to manage under these circumstances. We get it. Forever and ever, it's been a 40-hour, 5-day, 8-hour work week, and that's changed. What I'll say is, don't be afraid of it because it actually is better. You're going to a better place.
Yes. All right, we're back with Tony Amendolia from Final Gravity. Thanks for having us.
Thanks
Place
for
is
coming.
awesome. Beer is great.
Beer is good.
Thank you so much.
Tell us about the place. Tell us about Final Gravity Brewing Company.
Okay. Well, I started this actually as a homebrew shop in 2011. I've been homebrewing since 1992, and it's always been something in the back of my mind. I had retail experience. I thought I'd open a shop. And like in 2011, I finally did that. And then the laws in Virginia changed so that you could actually serve beer in your tasting room directly to customers. And I had always really wanted to open a brewery, even more than a homebrew shop, but didn't really think I could do that on such a large scale. So this was something where I could do it on a really small scale and still be economically viable. So we opened, we have a 2-barrel brew house, which means we were making about 62 gallons per batch, really tiny. We're here in Lakeside, on the north side of Richmond, and we're really a neighborhood brewery more than anything, which was kind of my idea. I had no idea COVID was coming, but I thought maybe the craft beer bubble would burst, and I thought, well, just keep it really small and just develop a community presence, and people who can walk here, would hopefully continue coming.
And
People
this
need
is
a
a great
place to
neighborhood, too. It's a
Yeah.
neighborhood where people don't mind walking a couple of blocks to have something.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And we started a running club, which really took off. So my wife and I are both into running, and we had a marketing person at the time who said, I want to start a running club. And I said, well, I like running, so let's give it a shot. And that blew up. And so Thursdays and Sundays we run, and we fill the place up with people who, not only are into drinking beer, but also doing healthy activities
Well,
as well.
you earn your beer, right? You go out, you run, you earn your beer, you come back, you drink your beer.
We'll run for beer. yeah.
Everybody wins. Yeah, that's awesome. Now, if we talk about brands and we think about Final Gravity as a brand, what's the most important thing for people to know about this place, Final Gravity? What's it about?
Well, it started with the beer.
Yep.
So my love of brewing beer and trying all the different styles. When I started brewing beer, I was able to brew styles that you couldn't really just go to the store and get from around the world, that sort of thing. And so when we decided to open a brewery here, we wanted something for everybody. So if you had a group of people come in, everybody could find something they wanted. We are definitely heavily focused on IPAs because that sells the most and one of my favorite styles. But if you come in here, if you have a group of 10 people, everyone's going to find at least one beer that they can they'll like.
Oh, that's awesome. And a community feel and a place for people in the community to come and
Yeah.
gather and hang out.
How'd you
Pretty
get the
amazing.
name?
So it's a brewing term. So you take a specific gravity reading of the wort, which is the unfermented beer, and so that's your original gravity. And then once the fermentation has happened, you take a final gravity reading. And between the two, you can figure out, one, that your beer's done fermenting, and two, you can figure out the alcohol content in the beer.
Very good.
I was never any good at chemistry. I just drink the beer. I
The
don't
beer is good for drinking. That's
Well, Tony, the place is awesome. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us. We love being here. We've been here as normal people, and now we're here as amateur broadcasters, I guess. But thanks for having us, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Beer and Brands with me and Kelly. Be sure to let us know what you think in the comments below. Hit the like button, share it with your friends, talk about it over the dinner table, whatever you need to do. But we love doing it, and we will see you next time on Brand Federation's Beer and Brands.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.